A 1, 2, 3, 4! Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Teach Film Preach. I'm Brett, and here we're talking about today the film Midsommar, which came out in 2019, and it was directed and written by Ari Aster, and it stars Florence Pugh, Jack Raynor. So it's a movie about a young woman who has a life tragedy event happen, and at the same time she's going through a kind of a rocky point in her relationship with her boyfriend, Christian, who's played by Jack Raynor. Danny is sort of kind of invited to go to Sweden with Christian and a bunch of his guy friends. And one of his friends is doing his PhD thesis on religious cults and things like that for his thesis. Invited by their friend Pele, this community where they basically like live off the land, and it's very rural. It's kind of in the mountains of Sweden, and very beautiful. And so they go and visit and have what they hope to be a really fun vacation. Obviously, with the it doesn't go according to plan. Some weird things start to happen, and some people go missing, and then it kind of starts the story of terror and pain and suspense. And Ari Aster has this kind of theme that seems to be going through all his movies, or at least from Hereditary and this one, which is humans deal with loss, how we deal with pain and suffering and grief and trying to get over traumatic events. So he really likes to focus on these themes because Hereditary and Midsommar have very similar tones to the movie, very similar feeling, obviously very different stories and different families and different things it focuses on, but similar feeling you get from that movie. You get the same for Midsommar. Let's first of all talk about the cast, because I think for me that's one of the best things about this movie is the acting. Florence Pugh is amazing. She is so good, and I remember the first time I saw her in, it was this, I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was this low sort of budget horror film on Netflix, and it was not very good, but she stood out. And then I remember she was in Lady Macbeth, and I went and watched that and was astonishing in that movie. And then she also did Little Women, which she was great in, and Fighting with My Family, which she was fantastic. And then in this, she was astonishing. This entire movie on her shoulders, and she carries it very well, and it's such a hard role. One of the things I love about Ari Aster is that he writes really great, very dynamic, very complicated and complex characters. He seems to focus on that, and that's really cool, and it's a really interesting take on grief and loss, and he writes these characters that have to go through such horrific things, and he does such a terrific job of showing these characters really try and deal with stress and grief, and Florence Pugh pulls this off. She has so much crying in this movie. First of all, I know on the poster of the movie she's got that flower crown on her head, and she is so burdened with grief and devastation, and she hasn't really dealt with it. She's just kind of pent it all up, and that's kind of the appeal of what Pele, the guy who is from the community, he kind of pulls her in and uses that to his advantage, as you find out later in the film. She does such a great job of playing someone who's damaged and hurt, who's trying to get over this horrific loss of her mom, dad, and sister. One of the great things that this movie does too is visuals. It is visually stunning. As was Hereditary, the director does a really great job of creating scary and intense moments, but without doing the cliches of a horror film. So he kind of has this, again, it's just a different take on the horror genre. It's still bloody and gory at parts, absolutely, and it's very dread-filled, but it's also a really interesting take. It's someone else's perspective on the horror genre, and I love that. It's like Jordan Peele with Get Out. And so Ari Aster has really stamped himself as a horror auteur, I think. He does a great job with the visuals in this movie, and like when Danny, at one point, she takes drugs, she takes mushrooms, and she does some like mushroom tea, and she trips out, and the way that he displays like the trees are kind of moving and they have like a life to them, and everything's sort of like breathing, and he does a really great job of capturing that that feeling, those visuals of being disorientated. He does a great job of all those different shots. The scenery in this movie is gorgeous, all the flowers, and the movie is all done in daytime. There isn't really a night scene. There's a couple of parts where I guess they do speak at night or they're inside and they're talking, but everything that you see in this movie is basically done in the middle of the day or the daytime or when there's light out, because where they are in Sweden, they only get light or dark in the summer, a couple hours out of the day. It's really weird and interesting that a movie is all taking place during the daytime, and it makes the horror aspect of it and the bloody parts like really pop out and stand out. Nothing bad happens during the day. You know what I mean? Like, if I think of something horror, it's like at night, someone's breaking in the night and trying to stab you. That's what I think of. I don't think of like beautiful nature and like wonderful trees and people living in a community together and helping each other. But behind closed doors, it's really sinister. And people in the community really truly believe what they're doing is great, and it's their culture. It's how they live life in this like circle. They always talk about this like circle in the beginning. When people are born and people die, people create the fulfill the circle of life. And he does a great job of symbolizing that in the movie. The thing about this film that I clashed with was the characters' decisions. And this is the problem with horror movies in general, is that I have a hard time really enjoying and relating to the character choices that they do. At first, like, you see something horrific and they choose to stick around. Like, you'd be leaving on your own accord. Now, in the movie, they stop them from doing that, but at the same time they had so many opportunities at the beginning or in the beginning of the story or partway through to leave and get out of harm's way. And so I have a hard time sympathizing with these characters sometimes, and that's my own issue with horror movies. I don't like them as much as I do maybe other genres, or as much, because I do like a good scary film, but again, I have a hard time caring about the characters. I did care about Florence Pugh, and I guess that's sort of the point, but everyone else in this film, make you want to develop a curiosity for them, a love for them. They were just sort of background to help support Florence Pugh's character Danny. So that's my little 2 cents on this film for the horror aspect of it. Another thing, I felt that the film was really lagging at times. I know it's a slow burn, and a lot of horror filmmakers nowadays are doing this sort of slow burn, like something's gonna happen but it never does, and I get it. It's building suspense, and good horror directors do a great job of that. Building suspense is a part of it for sure. I felt like this movie took about 20 minutes too long to get to where we wanted to get to. All the elements are there to make the movie excellent. They had good actors, they had a good story. They had really great visuals. The costumes and the set design in this movie, the production design is amazing. I definitely give them props. The sound and the sound effects, or the lack of sound at times that they choose to do this, are great. I think it just came down to the writing in the end, which is unfortunate to say, because I really enjoyed Hereditary, and I felt that's where this film took a little bit of a nosedive in comparison to the other movie. And I try and keep movies separated, but when they're from the same director and both films could live in the same universe, like maybe he is building his own Ari Aster universe, but they're so similar that I really wish that he would have chosen to do a film that was a little different than Hereditary. Instead of getting off the topic of tragic and loss, maybe making a horror movie that's a little bit more genre or a slasher, or maybe changing it up a little bit. And I might be speaking a little too soon, but I felt like both films were too similar. That was my biggest thing, was some of the writing, some of the character choices, and some of the pacing issues with the film. It took too long to get to where we wanted to get to, and it really slowed down at parts where it was trying to build suspense, but it almost felt boring. And it was so, you're like, oh, okay, let's move on, let's get going. I understand, like, as an audience member, you have to be patient for those things to get paid off, and it just wasn't quite the payoff wasn't quite there. So those were my only issues I really had with the film. Overall, it was a really entertaining movie. It was scary as hell. It kept you on your edge of your seat for most of it, and definitely in the second half. But I felt because of the first half, and it sort of lagged, and it took too long to build to where we wanted to get to, this movie wasn't quite up to my expectation, and that's okay. I still enjoyed it. I'm going to give Midsommar a B. Now, in comparison to Hereditary, which I think is an awesome movie, but again, it still deals with, cults. And I feel like, I hope that Ari Aster really does something different with his next movie. I'm excited to see what he puts out next. I think he's a great filmmaker. He's really interesting. He does things different, and he really challenges the audience, which I love. But I hope that he chooses a little bit of a different story, or a little bit of a different tone and feel to his next film. A great filmmaker knows how to do lots of different genres, or at least change it up every so often. Midsommar was great. I definitely would say go check it out. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Hope you come back and check out Mr. Teach Film Preach. I'm Brett, and as always, let's get taught.